I logged the crossing the way I'd logged 100 others. One pickup truck, headed east toward the fish camp lot. Time, direction, plate number. The pen moved across the page and the fisherman's taillights disappeared up the dirt road, and that was it. Most nights I filled maybe 2 pages. Some nights I filled none. I set the pen down and looked up from the logbook. The ferry platform was sitting on the west bank. 40 yards away, across black water, dry and still on the wrong side of the river. The crossing had just ended on the east side. The platform should have been under my feet. I stood up from the booth and walked to the edge of the east dock, checking the cable where it ran through the guide pulley. The cable was there, tensioned and tight, running straight across the river to the west bank anchor. The platform sat empty on the far dock, waiting. I hauled it back by hand. The cable came in smooth and heavy, hand over hand, the way it always did. The platform moved across the water without resistance. When it touched the east dock, I tied it off and checked both cleats, east side first. Then I crossed the platform and checked the west cleat from where the cable looped through. 42 yards of steel cable, anchored in concrete on both banks. The tension was correct. The river was running high from last week's rain, but the current wasn't strong enough to drag a platform sideways against a tensioned cable. Nothing was wrong with anything I could measure. I went back to the booth and opened the logbook. The last entry was the fisherman's truck, the one I'd just logged. I turned to a fresh line and wrote, "Platform drift, no cause." I stopped, pen still on the page, and flipped back through the week's entries. There it was again. 3 days ago, platform drift, no cause. And again, 2 days before that, and once more on Saturday night. 4 times this week. 4 times I'd written that exact phrase. I turned the pages slowly, looking at the week's logs. The paper was wrong. The pages were smudged and slightly warped, the way paper gets when it's been wet. I ran my thumb across the surface and felt the ripple of dried water damage. But the booth had stayed dry. We hadn't had rain since last Tuesday, and even then the plywood walls kept everything inside bone dry. The pages from the week before were clean and flat. Only this week's entries had that damp, wrinkled look. I closed the logbook and sat back in the folding chair, looking out through the booth's open window at the river. The water was black and smooth, broken only by the occasional ripple where the current pushed against a submerged log. The platform sat quiet on the east dock. The cable hung in its usual shallow curve between the banks. I thought about the man who'd come through 3 nights running. He'd arrived on foot each time, walking out of the darkness where the West Bank Road met the dock. The State Forest Access Road, the one that dead-ended a mile into the Apalachicola National Forest. No parking lot, no campground. Nothing out there but pine trees and logging trails that hadn't been used in 20 years. The first time he showed up, I didn't think much of it. It was late, maybe 11:30, and I heard footsteps on the west dock before I saw him. Mid-40s, gray canvas jacket, no bag, no car. He asked to cross east. I asked his name for the log, and he said Alex Estrada. His voice was flat and even, not unfriendly, not strange in any way I could name. I ran him across. He sat on the platform rail and didn't speak during the crossing. When we touched the east dock, he stepped off and walked up the dirt road toward the fish camp lot. I logged the name and the time, and that was it. The second time he came through, I recognized the jacket. Same gray canvas, same no bag, same walk out of the forest road. I asked his name, and he said, Alex Estrada again. I almost asked if he'd crossed 2 nights ago, but I didn't. People walk out of the forest sometimes. Campers, hunters, guys who park at the trailhead and hike in deeper than they meant to. It wasn't my job to ask questions. The third time was tonight, just before the fisherman showed up. Same man, same jacket, same name. This time I watched him closer during the crossing. His jacket was soaked through, not damp, but soaked, like he'd been standing in the rain. But it hadn't rained tonight. He didn't shiver. He didn't look cold. He just sat on the rail and stared at the east bank the whole way across. When the platform touched the east dock, I bent down to tie off the stern cleat, and when I looked up, he was gone. Not walking up the road, gone. The road was 30 feet of open ground before the tree line, and there was nowhere he could have disappeared to in the 2 seconds my eyes were off him. I'd stood there for a minute, looking at the empty road, and then I'd gone back to the booth and logged it. Alex Estrada, west to east, 10:43. Now I sat with the logbook closed in front of me, the pages still smelling faintly of damp, and I told myself the same thing I'd been telling myself all week. The platform drifted because the current caught it wrong. The pages got wet because I spilled something and didn't notice. The man walked out of the forest because he had a reason, and the reason wasn't my business. I looked out at the black water and didn't believe a word of it. The bell rang twice at 11:46. I looked up from the logbook and saw him standing at the west dock. Same gray canvas jacket, same posture, same stillness. He wasn't moving around like someone who'd been waiting. He was just there. I stood up from the booth and walked to the cable pull. The river was flat and black between the banks, no current visible on the surface. The platform made its usual sounds as I hauled it across, the scrape of steel on water, the creak of the cable running through the guideposts. 40 yards takes about 3 minutes at a steady pull. I kept my eyes on the west dock the whole way over. He stepped onto the platform as soon as it touched. No hesitation, no looking around. He walked to the rail and sat down on it, facing east. I secured the stern cleat and straightened up. "Name for the log," I said. "Alex Estrada." His voice was flat, not cold, not unfriendly, just flat, the way someone sounds when they're stating a fact that doesn't need elaboration. I nodded and started the pullback east. The crossing takes 3 minutes. I've done it 1,000 times, and I know what 3 minutes feels like on this river. Tonight it felt longer, maybe because I was watching him instead of watching the cable. His jacket was soaked through, not damp around the shoulders like someone caught in a quick rain, but soaked. The fabric dark with water, clinging to his chest and arms. It hadn't rained tonight. It hadn't rained all week. He wasn't shivering. He wasn't rubbing his hands together or tucking them under his arms. He wasn't doing anything. He just sat on the rail and stared at the east bank. Didn't blink. Didn't shift his weight. Didn't look down at the water moving under the platform. I'd seen people zone out on crossings before. People get tired. People get quiet. But this was different. He looked like he was staring at something specific, something fixed on the far bank, and nothing in the world was going to make him look away from it. The platform touched the east dock with a soft bump. I let go of the cable and moved forward to tie off the stern cleat. 2 seconds. Eyes down, hands on the rope, loop it through the cleat, and pull it tight. I looked up. He was gone. Not walking up the road, not disappearing into the tree line. Gone. The road stretched out 30 feet of bare dirt before the pines started, and the night was clear enough to see all of it. There was nowhere to go in 2 seconds, nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. The road was empty. I stood there holding the rope and staring at the empty ground where he should have been walking away. 3 nights. Same man, same jacket, same name, same vanishing act every time. I tied off the cleat and walked back to the booth. My hands felt steady, but my chest felt tight. The kind of tight you get when you know something is wrong, but you can't name it yet. I sat down and pulled the logbook toward me. Alex Estrada, west to east, 11:47. I wrote it out in the same neat block letters I'd used the other 2 nights. Same entry, same name, same direction. The pen scratched across the page and I could hear it louder than usual, like the booth had gotten quieter. 3 nights, same name. I told myself he was staying at one of the fish camps. I told myself he walked out of the forest for his own reasons, and those reasons weren't my business. I told myself the East Bank Road had shadows I wasn't seeing from here, places a man could slip into without me noticing. I didn't believe any of it. I added a note in the margin. Passenger departed East Dock, direction unknown. The pen felt heavier than it should have. My handwriting looked wrong somehow, the letters too careful, too deliberate. I set the pen down on the open logbook and looked out at the empty East Bank Road. The ink was still wet on direction unknown. The storm came in around 1 in the morning. I'd been sitting in the booth staring at the logbook page at direction unknown, when the wind picked up and the temperature dropped 10 degrees in what felt like seconds. The cypress trees on both banks started moving, branches thrashing against each other. The river went from black to brown, the current churning up sediment from the bottom. The single bulb in the booth flickered once, twice, then held. I checked the platform through the window, still on the east side, right where it should be, tied off at the dock behind me. The radio crackled.
Tower 14, this is base. Come in, Glenn.
Janet's voice. I checked my watch, 1:14 a.m., because Janet never called after 9. In 2 years, I'd never heard from her past sunset unless something was broken or the county was shutting down the crossing for maintenance. I picked up the handset. This is Tower 14. Go ahead.
Log no more crossings tonight,
she said.
Regardless of who arrives, keep the platform on the east bank.
Her voice was careful and flat, the way someone sounds when they're reading from a decision they already made, when they've thought through what they're going to say, and they're not going to explain it. I looked out at the empty river. The rain hadn't started yet, but the air smelled like it was coming. Copy that, I said. Can I ask why? The radio stayed quiet for a beat. Then,
Weather service upgraded the storm. I need you to secure the platform and stay in the booth until it passes.
that made sense. Except the weather service didn't call Janet at 1 in the morning, and if they had, she would have said so. I pressed the transmit button. Janet, that name I've been logging. Alex Estrada. Same man, 3 nights running. Gray canvas jacket, no car. Walks in from the forest road. He crossed again tonight, and I didn't see where he went after the platform touched the dock. Do you know who that is? Nothing. The radio was silent long enough that I checked the signal indicator. Green. Working. Then Janet's voice came back, quieter than before.
That name is in the county records,
she said.
Don't look it up.
I stared at the handset. What does that mean? I asked. What's in the records? Why shouldn't I? The radio exploded into static. White noise, loud enough that I yanked the handset away from my ear. I tried adjusting the frequency, but the storm had taken it. The signal was gone. I set the handset back in its cradle and looked out at the river. The wind was gusting hard enough now that the booth was creaking. That name is in the county records. Don't look it up. I tried the radio again. Nothing. Just static. The West Bank bell rang twice. I froze. The double ring signal. Someone waiting to cross. I didn't move the platform. I'd confirmed it was on the east side 2 minutes ago. I turned and looked out the booth window at the east dock. The platform was there. Steel deck, cable guide, the Wakulla County seal painted on the stern rail. Right where I'd left it. The bell rang again. Twice. Same rhythm, same interval. Then it stopped. I stood up slowly and walked to the doorway, gripping the frame. 40 yards of black, storm-churned water between me and the West Bank. Rain starting to come down in scattered drops, heavy enough to sting. I looked at the west dock. The platform was there, on the West Bank, full-sized, steel, unmistakable. The same platform that was supposed to be behind me at the east dock. I turned around and checked the east dock again. Still there. Platform, cable, everything normal. I looked back at the West Bank. The platform was still there. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was the cold. The temperature had dropped fast and I wasn't dressed for it. But that wasn't why. I'd been running this crossing for 2 years. I knew the ferry. I knew the cable. I knew how far 40 yards was, and I knew that a steel platform couldn't be in 2 places at once. But I was looking at it. Both of them, east and west. I stepped out of the booth doorway and walked toward the east dock, rain starting to come down hard. I walked out to the edge of the east dock where the cable should have been running tight across the water. It was lying in coils at my feet. Loose, slack, like someone had unspooled 42 yards of steel cable and left it in a pile on the planks. I stared at it, trying to make it make sense. The cable ran from the concrete anchor on this bank to the concrete anchor on the west bank. 42 yards of quarter-inch braided steel, tensioned to pull a platform across 40 yards of river. It couldn't go slack. Not unless the distance between the banks had somehow collapsed to nothing. I looked up at the river. Still there. Still moving. Still 40 yards of black water with the current running high from last week's rain. The cable couldn't be slack, but I was looking at it, lying in loose coils on the dock like a dead snake. The West Bank bell started ringing. Not the double ring signal, continuous. The same rhythm over and over, no pause, no break, just ringing and ringing and ringing. I stood there with the coiled cable at my feet and the bell hammering across the water, and I couldn't move. My legs didn't want to work. Everything around me felt wrong. The sound of the bell, the shape of the coils, the smell of the river. I forced myself to turn and walk back to the booth. My hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the door frame to steady myself. The logbook was still open on the desk where I'd left it. I looked down at tonight's page. Every line was filled in my handwriting. The same entry, repeated over and over. Crossing, Alex Estrada, east to west. No time recorded. I counted them. 14 lines. 14 crossings I didn't remember running. Didn't remember logging. But the handwriting was mine. I knew my own handwriting. The way I formed the capital A. The way the tail of the E curved down. The way I wrote the dash between entries. I wrote none of it. The bell kept ringing. I needed to stop it. I needed to check the mechanism. Needed to figure out what was wrong with it. But the only way to do that was to haul the platform back across and step onto the west bank. I went back out to the dock and took the cable in my hands. It was tight. Normal tension, normal resistance. The river was 40 yards wide again. The cable stretched taut between the 2 banks like it had never been any other way. I pulled the platform across, hand over hand, the cable running through the guide the way it was supposed to, the steel deck swinging level over the current. The bell stopped ringing when the platform touched the west dock. I tied off and stepped onto the west bank. The state forest road was gone. Where the paved county access road should have been, the road I'd driven in on 2 years ago. The road every car that crossed this ferry came in on. There was a narrow, unpaved track going into the cypress trees. Dirt and ruts and standing water. Not a road, a trail. Maybe old logging access, maybe something older than that. The air smelled wrong. Brackish, low tide. The smell of salt water and mud flats. The smell of the coast, not a river crossing 40 miles inland. I turned toward the tree line, toward the bell mounted on its post, and a woman's voice came from the darkness. "You keep carrying people who already crossed." I knew the voice. I knew it the way you know your own name, the way you know the sound of your own heartbeat. It was my mother's voice. She'd been dead for 3 years. "You need to stop." I couldn't move. My legs locked. My chest went tight. I stood there at the edge of the west dock with the unpaved track in front of me, and the brackish smell in the air and my dead mother's voice coming from the trees. Headlights swept across the east bank behind me. I turned. A sedan was waiting at the east dock, somebody needing a crossing. When I turned back to the west, the paved road was there again. The county access road. Clean blacktop, the yellow line down the center, the reflector posts along the shoulder. The unpaved track was gone. The air smelled like river. I got back to the platform and hauled it across, my hands shaking so hard I nearly lost my grip on the cable twice. The sedan pulled onto the deck. A man and a woman, mid-30s, looked like they were headed to one of the fish camps for the weekend. They didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. I ran the crossing in silence, tied off at the east dock, and logged it without looking at their faces. I took out my phone. The couple in the sedan had pulled off the east dock 5 minutes ago, their taillights disappearing up the dirt road toward the fish camp lot. The booth was quiet. The storm had moved east, leaving the air thick and still, the kind of quiet that made you notice the sound of your own breathing. Janet had told me not to look up the name. I opened the Wakulla County Public Records Archive and typed Alex Estrada into the search bar. The page loaded slow, the way county sites always do, like the server was running on a desktop in somebody's basement. The results came up. One hit. A scanned document from 1988, marked as an accident report. I clicked it. The text was hard to read at first. The scan was dark in places, faded in others, like somebody had photocopied a photocopy and then scanned that. But the header was clear enough. Wakulla County Road Department. Incident report. September 3rd, 1988. I scrolled down. A man named Alex Estrada had drowned at this crossing on September 3rd, 1988. The cable ferry's west anchor had failed during a flood stage crossing. The platform went sideways in the current. Alex Estrada, the only passenger, went into the river. He was 44 years old. His body was recovered downstream 2 days later. He was the only casualty. The county rebuilt the ferry the following year with reinforced anchors. I read it twice, then I scrolled further. There was a photograph, black and white, grainy, taken from what looked like a driver's license or a work badge. A man, mid-40s, staring straight at the camera with the flat, neutral expression people use for official photos. He was wearing a gray canvas jacket. I set the phone down on the logbook and stared at it for a long time. Then I picked it back up and read the report again. The west anchor pin had pulled loose during flood stage. The platform swung sideways in the current. Alex Estrada went into the river. They found his body 2 days later, 1.5 miles downstream, caught in a logjam near the county line. I thought about the man who had stepped onto my platform 3 nights running. The gray canvas jacket, the flat voice, the way he stared at the east bank the entire crossing and disappeared the moment the platform touched the dock. The photograph on my phone showed the same jacket. I opened the logbook. The entries from tonight were normal. The fisherman's pickup, the sedan with the couple. Before that, the 3 nights this week when Alex Estrada had come through. I'd written his name each time. I remembered writing it. But there were more. I flipped back through the past 2 weeks, scanning the pages. Most of the entries were routine, pickups, sedans, the occasional motorcycle. But scattered through the nights were other entries. 12 of them. Same name, same direction. West to east. The handwriting was mine. I recognized the way I looped the capital A, the way the tail of the lowercase d curled back under the line. My handwriting, my pen. But I didn't remember writing them. Some of the entries were on pages that should have been blank. Nights when I was certain no one had come through. Nights when I'd sat in the booth for 8 hours without a single bell. But the entries were there, logged and dated, in my own hand. I went back further. The entries started 2 weeks ago. Before that, nothing. Just routine crossings, trucks, cars, the occasional pedestrian walking to the fish camps. 2 weeks ago, the first entry appeared. Alex Estrada. West to east, no time recorded. 12 entries total. All of them the same. All of them in nights I couldn't account for. I sat with the open logbook and the phone screen showing the 1988 photograph. The booth felt smaller than it had an hour ago. The single bulb overhead flickered once, then held. The man in the photograph was wearing the same jacket. The man who had been stepping onto my platform 3 nights running, and apparently 12 times before that, on nights I had no memory of, had drowned at this exact crossing 36 years ago, trying to reach the East Bank. I thought about the way he sat on the platform rail during the crossings, the way he never spoke except to give his name, the way his jacket was soaked through but he wasn't shivering, wasn't cold-looking, wasn't anything, the way he stared at the East Bank the entire time, the way he disappeared the moment the platform touched the dock. I set the phone face down on the logbook and looked out at the dark river, the photograph of the gray canvas jacket still lit behind the screen. The mist came up fast. 1 second I could see the dock planks and the dark line of the cable running across the water, and the next second I couldn't see anything. Not the booth walls, not the window frame 6 inches from my face, not my own hand when I held it up in front of me. I stepped backward and hit the chair, nearly falling. The air was wrong, too thick, too cold. I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or closed. I reached out for the booth wall and my hand went through empty space where the plywood should have been. My boot hit something solid and I looked down, trying to see what I'd stepped on. The deck was there, but it wasn't steel. It was wood. Old planks, rough cut, the kind that splinter if you drag your hand across them wrong. I took another step and the platform shifted under me. Not the small, settling movement I was used to, but a hard sideways lurch that made me grab for the rail. The rail was there, but it wasn't mine. The metal was different, thinner. The welds were hand-done, not factory work. And when I looked down at the stern post, I saw the county seal painted on in white. The old version, the one with the palmetto tree in the center instead of the river outline. The county stopped using that seal in '96. I remembered seeing it on old road signs when I first moved down here. The river was running high, higher than I'd ever seen it. The water was black and fast, and the sound of it was wrong, too loud, the current hitting the platform hull with a hollow, booming noise that made my teeth ache. The platform lurched again, and I went down hard on one knee. The cable was pulling wrong. I could feel it through the deck, the tension shifting, the west anchor slipping. Someone was screaming. A man in a gray canvas jacket was gripping the rail 10 feet away from me, his knuckles white, his face turned toward the west bank. He was screaming at me, but I couldn't make out the words over the sound of the river. I got to my feet and the platform swung sideways again, harder this time, and I saw what he was screaming about. The west anchor pin was halfway out of the cleat. The cable was still threaded through the guide, but the pin that held it in place had pulled up out of its receiver, and with every hard pull from the current, it was coming up another inch. If it went, the platform would swing free. The current would take it downstream, and there was nothing between here and the Gulf that would stop it. The man in the gray jacket screamed again. This time I heard him. "The pin! Get the anchor pin back in the cleat! It's pulling out! Get the pin in!" I threw myself across the deck. My boots slipped on the wet wood and I went down on my stomach, sliding, my hands scrabbling for the cleat. The pin was right there, half out, the steel shining in the dark. I grabbed it with both hands and shoved down. It didn't move. The current hit the platform again and the whole thing tilted, and the pin slid up another 2 inches. If it cleared the receiver, we were done. I braced my feet against the deck and drove my palm down on top of the pin as hard as I could. The pin seated. The sound it made was clean and final, steel on steel, and the platform swung back level and held. My palm was on fire. I pulled my hand back, and saw the cut, a clean slice across the base of my thumb where the pin's edge had gone through the skin. Blood was running down my wrist. The man in the gray jacket turned to look at me. His face was wrong. It was there, all the features in the right places, but it wasn't moving the way a living face moves. No shift in the eyes, no breath, just still, like a photograph, like something printed and held up in front of me. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. The mist came back in, thick and white and cold, and when it cleared, I was standing in the booth. The plywood walls were there, the window, the chair, the logbook sitting on the desk where I'd left it. The river outside was calm, flat black water, no current, no flood. The platform was steel again, sitting quiet at the east dock. My palm was bleeding. The cut was real. The same cut, in the same place. The skin torn open where I'd driven the pin down. Blood was running between my fingers and dripping onto the floor. I pressed my palm against my shirt and looked down at the cut, which was real and wet and would not stop bleeding. And then the West Bank bell began ringing and did not stop. I looked out the booth window at the west dock. The ferry platform was there, and it was full. 30 people, maybe more, standing packed together on the steel deck. All of them in wet clothes, all of them motionless, all of them with their faces turned toward me. No one was hauling the cable. I pressed my bleeding palm harder against my shirt and watched through the window. The cable went taut on its own. The platform began moving across the river toward the east bank, pulling itself, no operator at the hand pull, no one touching anything. The figures didn't move. They just stood there, packed together, all of them facing the booth, all of them watching. I understood what I was looking at. These weren't Alex Estrada. Alex Estrada was the one who'd been arriving alone, night after night, asking to cross, the one who drowned here in 1988 and had been trying to reach the East Bank ever since. These others were different. These were everyone else. Everyone who drowned in this stretch of the Ocklakanee, going back further than I could account for. They were using the crossing the way the living use it, because the East Bank is higher ground and that's where crossings go. The platform moved steadily across the black water, no current pushing it, no sound except the cable pulling through the guides. It touched the east dock with a soft bump. I walked out of the booth. My legs didn't seem to work properly at first, but I forced them to move. I walked to the edge of the east dock and stood there, bleeding palms still pressed to my shirt, and watched. The figures began stepping off one by one. They moved past me without looking at me. Their clothes were soaked through, water dripping from jackets and shirts and pants. But their footsteps made no sound on the dock planks. They walked up the East Bank dirt road toward the fish camp lot and the county road beyond it. A slow procession of wet, silent figures disappearing into the darkness. I didn't move. I just stood there and watched them pass. One figure stopped at the booth window. It pressed one hand flat against the glass. The hand left no fog, no condensation, no mark. Then it moved on up the road with the others. The last figure stepped off the platform. The bell stopped. The silence that followed was total. No wind, no water sounds, no night birds. Just the platform sitting empty at the east dock, and the road stretching away into the trees, dark and still. I went back into the booth. The logbook was sitting on the desk where I'd left it. I sat down in the chair and opened it to the current page. Every page was full. Not just the current week, not just the 2 weeks of anomalies. Every page going back to the first entry of my tenure 2 years ago. The handwriting was not mine. The entries were crossing records, names, directions, times. I flipped through the pages and saw them going back further than the logbook's physical pages should allow. More entries, more names, all of them in the same unfamiliar handwriting, neat and careful and endless. I closed the logbook and set it on the desk. Outside, the cable went slack. I could see it through the window, lying in loose coils on the dock planks again, the way it had before. Then slowly, over the course of a minute or two, it tightened back to normal tension. The platform settled into place at the east dock. The river was calm. Flat black water, no current, no movement. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, gray lights spreading across the trees on the far bank. The storm was over. I sat in the booth with the filled logbook open in front of me, the sky going gray in the east, the river flat and quiet, the East Bank Road empty. Janet arrived at 6 in the morning in her Wakulla County Road Department truck. I heard the tires on the gravel, then the engine shutting off, the door opening and closing, her boots on the dock planks. She came into the booth and picked up the logbook without asking. She opened it, looked at the first page, then the second. Then she began flipping through them, faster, all the way to the back. Every page was full. The handwriting that wasn't mine, the entries going back further than the book's pages should allow, names and crossing directions and times that filled every line, front to back. She closed the logbook. Didn't say anything about what she'd seen. Didn't ask me to explain it. She set it under her arm and looked at me the way someone looks at a person they're not going to explain anything to. "The county is decommissioning the ferry," she said. "A bridge proposal over the Ochlockonee at this crossing was approved. Construction starts in October." I stared at her. "The same proposal that's been filed and stalled for 20 years, I said. She nodded. "That's the one." I waited for her to say more. She didn't. She just stood there holding the logbook under her arm, keys in her other hand. "You knew what was at this crossing," I said. She looked at me for a moment. Her face didn't change. "The county knew," she said. "That's why the bridge kept getting filed and stalled. Somebody always found a reason." She picked up her keys. "It's done now." I wanted to ask her what that meant, what the county knew, how long they'd known it, whether anyone else had worked this crossing and seen what I'd seen, whether anyone else had written names they didn't remember writing, whether anyone else had bled from a cut that happened 36 years ago. But I didn't ask. She wasn't going to answer. "Get your things," she said. "I'll take you back to the depot." I nodded, turned back toward the booth. My thermos was on the desk where I'd left it. I picked it up. The desk was empty otherwise. The radio was off. The cable diagram was still taped to the wall above the window. Everything else was county property. I turned to leave and stopped. There was a gray canvas jacket folded on the operator's chair. It was dry, not damp, not drying, dry, as if it had never been wet. I stood in the doorway holding my thermos. My palm was still bandaged where the pin had cut it. The bandage was tight around my hand, the gauze clean and white. Outside the window, the river was flat and ordinary in the early light. The platform was at the east dock. The cable was tensioned correctly between the two banks. Janet was standing by her truck with the logbook under her arm, waiting for me. I looked at the jacket on the chair. Gray canvas, no stains, no marks. Folded neatly, the way someone folds a jacket they're leaving behind for the next person to find. I left it on the chair and walked out of the booth. The dock planks were solid under my boots. The air smelled like river water and mud and wet cypress. The sun was coming up over the tree line on the east bank, throwing long shadows across the road. I walked down the east dock toward Janet's truck. Didn't look back at the booth. Didn't look at the chair inside it, or the jacket folded there. The gray canvas jacket stayed where it was, on the operator's chair in the decommissioned booth. As I stepped off the east dock for the last time,